The Leica 12-60 is one of the most underrated lenses for the Micro Four Thirds system. But is it any good for video? Let's check it out. First off, it's basically a super zoom with a full frame equivalent of like 12 to 120. I mean, sure, there's lenses in the system with bigger ranges like the Olympus 12 to 100 or the Lumix 14 to 140, but they have some massive downsides compared to the Leica 12-60. Mainly, they don't come with your camera. Yes, the Leica 12-60 is an option to buy with the GH7 for not that big of an upcharge, and that is the ideal way to buy it because otherwise it's like almost $1,000, which, I mean, spoilers, this is gonna be a positive review on this lens, but $997? It's too much. So back in the day, the Lumix 12-35 was pretty much the most popular pro kit lens with the Micro Four Thirds system, but if you buy a GH7 today, I would definitely recommend you packaging the 12-60 with that for a massive discount on the lens. For this reason, you can easily pick up a 12-60 along with the body for cheap, or maybe find some decent secondhand copies online for about the same price as adding on to the GH7. So what about this lens is great for video? Well, a lot. It has a fantastic build and feels pretty great to use. I mean, the focus is fly-by-wire, but in my experience, it is just about intuitive enough to use for your like run and gun handheld videography work. Although, I'm probably not going to be taking this thing onto a film set anytime soon. The zoom is fairly long and very smooth to use, and this right here is one of the biggest single things for me. This lens is effectively parfocal, so you can do the classic punch in, grab your focus, zoom back out method, and it works. It works. The 12-35, the Olympus 12-60, and others like the Olympus 12-100 even have massive issues with focus shifting while you're zooming. For some people, that might not matter at all, and for some people, that could be a total deal maker or breaker for a certain lens. Rest assured, the 12-60 is about as parfocal as you can get outside of like the Leica 10-25 or a cinema lens. I can't stress how important this single fact is for me though. I also can't stress enough how important it is for you guys to interact with this video as much as possible. That means liking, commenting, and especially subscribing to my channel. It really helps a lot and it doesn't cost you guys a single thing, so I sure would appreciate it. But you might ask, what is the point of a parfocal lens that doesn't have a constant aperture? I mean, this thing is basically the equivalent of like the Canon 24-105 with just a bigger zoom range, but it starts at f2.8 and goes to f4, so what's that gonna do for your video? Well, there are two methods to deal with this. The lens at 12mm is 2.8, but it pretty much immediately starts closing down the second you zoom into even 14 or 18mm. Fortunately, the darkening of the lens is very gradual and it doesn't flicker really at all when changing from 2.8 to 4. It's kind of a smooth roll off. And if you are someone who uses auto ISO, it shouldn't be a problem at all. Just set it to auto ISO and wide open and zoom in and out as much as you want. Solution 2 would be my preferred method though, as a guy who likes consistency and is 99% of the time in full manual mode. And that is simply set the lens to f4. This does hurt your light gathering at the 12mm end, but when you zoom from 12 to 60, there is absolutely no visible shift in light or any kind of flickering or anything. It's completely smooth, seamless, and that is great. That is so huge for those zooms while recording. I did notice in my testing though that if you zoom really fast, like crash zoom fast, then you do see the camera just a couple steps behind when it comes to those exposure shifts. I haven't really noticed this in the real world, and I don't think most people usually zoom this fast, but it is something to take note of. Another huge positive I've noticed using this lens is the macro abilities. I mean, especially zoomed in all the way to 60mm, this thing can focus pretty darn close and get you some really cool details on small subjects, maybe for a wedding, seeing the rings, or I don't know, whatever situation. If you've got a fairly small subject, this can get pretty darn close to it. This really wasn't meant to be like a comprehensive review, but those are pretty much the two biggest pros for me, the constant focus and exposure when set to f4 while zooming. when you are in an event situation, even if there are backup cameras going, you want to have your shot to be as consistent as possible for those multi-camera edits when you might have that perfect moment. And if you are in a run and gun situation where you have no idea what's going on, the 12 to 60 range gives you a fairly wide angle as well as a fairly respectable telephoto all in one. Sure, there are other aspects to the lens. The image, the stabilization is really amazing with dual IS, and it's completely weather sealed, I think even up to freeze proofing for those occasions where you're shooting it in the snow, the rain, dust, you know, whatever. Even way more expensive like the Leica 42.5mm can't hang in some of those situations. I mean, the characteristics are fine. It has decent enough bokeh, decent flare performance, really pretty nice colors actually, but this is a workman-like lens, which I don't really think anyone is buying for those film-like characteristics. But if you are, those characteristics are, I mean, they're generally pretty good. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing great about them. Oh, and it is super tiny, like 12 to 35 tiny. It's pretty much the same size, maybe a little bit longer, which is great for travel, portability, as well as keeping a pretty low profile in certain situations. But honestly, sometimes I wish it was a little bit bigger, like the Olympus 12 to 100 or the Leica 10 to 25. It's just a little too small if you're like have it on a cage. It's kind of hard to actually zoom the lens, you know what I mean? The ring is just so far back, you know, it doesn't protrude off the body of the camera that much. So if you have a cage on this thing, it can really kind of interfere with the operation of the lens, which, you know, whatever. And it does extend, by the way, so if you don't like that, sorry, it is what it is. It's also part of that whole family of those Leica f2.8 to 4 aperture zooms. If you're not familiar, there's also an 8 to 18 and a 50 to 100, giving you an insanely huge range of a full frame 16 to 400. Unless you are in extreme low light situations often, then these could be the only 2 or 3 lenses you'd ever need for any project, and they would match nearly perfectly. Almost, again, like a cinema set, great for videographers. Or if you're shooting multiple takes or using multiple cameras at once for any reason. I think everybody needs that sort of one big range, super zoom sort of lens for a multitude of reasons, and this is one of the best on the market for the Micro Four Thirds system. Probably the most flexible jack of all trades type lenses for the system, and it fills that niche of that sort of always on your camera or travel lens role much better than the 12 to 35 in my opinion, even though it is f4 on the long end. You know, I love hiking around with this lens, and I really found it did pretty much everything I needed to and more. I never would have been able to achieve certain shots that my clients wanted without a large range zoom like this, going in from a logo and coming out to the entire store or things like that. So do I recommend this lens? Yeah, pretty much for almost everyone. I think you definitely need to get it with a kit or used, but I think it is much better than the 12 to 35 f2.8 as a kit lens. Some of the other super zooms in the system, like the 14 to 140 or the 12 to 100 from Olympus, definitely put this lens as a run for its money, but I don't think they really do the same job as this do. The 14 to 140 has a much lower aperture. The 12 to 100, it's bigger, it's a little bit more expensive. It doesn't really fit the same niche. But I will be comparing this to the Olympus in a future video, so definitely watch out for that one. Either way, this is an amazing lens. It came with my camera, and unlike the 12 to 35, I definitely can't really see myself selling this thing anytime soon. It's just so convenient, and yeah, I really, really enjoy this lens. All right, guys, so you know the drill. You've watched YouTube before. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe down below. And while you're down there, you should definitely leave a comment and let me know, what is your like kit lens, super zoom lens, or that sort of just always on type of lens? Is it the 12 to 60 or maybe the Lumix 12 to 60, which is a little bit darker aperture, or something else? Or, you know, maybe you don't even use a super zoom lens. So if you don't, tell me why. Either way, leave a comment down below. And if you hit subscribe, I will see you in the next video.